Hello everyone, I'm Professor DK and welcome back to another episode of the Login App series. So today we're going to learn something interesting. We're going to talk about classes, and whatever we learn today, it's going to apply across all languages as well. So I have covered the general idea of classes, and it applies to C++, Java, Python as well. But at the end, we will see how to implement classes in Android in particular. Okay. And as you all know, the way I would like to approach a particular topic is to give you real world examples of how these topics come into picture. And that is what I've done today by creating a storyline. And I hope that it is helpful and it keeps you engaged. All right. So let's say that you and your friends are thinking about developing an application or a website which is going to help with the general well-being of the users. It's going to tell if a person is healthy or not, if by suggesting a particular diet, or by predicting the calories of a particular food item, right? And for any of the application like this, you will need information from the users, and that is when you will basically create a profile page where they come in and they probably enter information like the image, the username, the email, password, and also information like age, weight, and height, which is required for this particular application, because you will need to predict if they are healthy or not based on the height and weight, right? So based on the information that you want, based on the requirement of a particular application or website, you ask the users to enter the information. And here, one thing that you'll notice is all the information that you're asking is related to a particular entity, and that entity is nothing but the profile information of the user, right? So let's say that you create a profile page and have cut down on some of the information so that I can keep it simple for you. So I'm going to ask the user to upload their image there and also enter information like their name, age, and weight. And a particular user comes in and he's going to upload his details. This particular picture is from my Instagram profile, so if you want to follow me there, you can do that. I have mentioned my user ID at the bottom there, and you'll notice here that I basically provide my information based on the fields that are being asked by the particular app or website. And then another user comes by and he's going to enter his information, and this is my friend Krishna, by the way, so he's going to enter his information. So here you'll notice that basically the profile page is a blueprint, and based on the information that is being asked, the users come in and then enter their information. So this is what a class does. So a class is nothing but a blueprint for organizing all the related information together. And the way you do this is basically in Java, you say public class profile, and here public means that this particular class is visible across all other files, and class is the keyword which is used to specify a class, and profile is the name that I've given it. Okay, and inside this particular class I'm going to store the information that I need, and in this case it's the image, name, age, and weight. And the only thing that you need to take care of here is you need to make sure that you pass in the right data type. And for the image, it is the drawable in Android, and for name it is just a string, and since age and weight are numbers, you're going to pass in the int data type. Okay, now let's say I want to enter the information for myself. Now to create a user, I say profile user1, because user1, the object that I'm talking about, needs to be of the class profile. So I say profile user1 equal to new. So when you use the new keyword, it's going to create an instance of the class profile. And after that, to access any of the variables inside this class, I use the dot operator. So I can say user1.image and I can set the values. You can see here that I have set the values here. So user1.name equal to Dheeraj, and since it is a string, I've passed in a string, and wherever it expects numbers, I've passed in the numbers. All right. So this is how I have created for one of the users. Now what happens for another user, right? So again, it's going to be the same code, except that you give the instance another name. So here instead of user1, I say user2, and I use that particular instance to access the variables and then pass in the values. Okay, so this is how you create a class and then create instances of the class and pass in the values. Now, although we have created the two users, you will notice that it has taken up a lot of lines here, and this is not a good way or a good practice of writing code, because we have something called a constructor for doing this. A constructor is nothing but a function which lets you initialize the variables inside the class. And the way you create a constructor is you take in the name of the class. So since it is profile here, I say profile, and then based on the variables that I need to initialize, I just pass them as parameters. So here the image, name, age, and weight, and inside this particular function you initialize the variables. And although here it might be a little confusing because it has image and image, I'm going to explain what that means in a bit, but for now just understand that this dot image is basically referring to this variable here inside the class, and this particular variable image is nothing but what is coming from your code. Okay, so a constructor basically initializes the value of the variables, and you actually saw the constructor in the previous slide. When you say user1 equal to new profile, and here this is nothing but a constructor. It's a blank constructor. It does not do any kind of initialization. Okay, so now when you define a constructor this way, whatever you did previously no longer works. You need to create your profile in this particular format where you pass in the parameters, right? So once you have created a constructor, it expects you to pass in the required parameters, and here I have created user1 new, and after that inside profile I'm passing the different parameters, and you'll see that in one line I have passed all the values for these variables, and the same goes for the other user as well. Now that the two users are created, let's talk about the this keyword. Okay, so when you created an instance of the class, what happens is this dot image basically refers to user1 dot image. So it's analogous to user1 dot image, and this is basically referring to that instance of that particular class. Okay, so in the case of user2, it's going to be user2 dot image, user2 dot name, user2 dot age, user2 dot weight. Okay, so this keyword is essential when you want to refer to that instance of that class. Okay, so that's what it is. Now we look at another important concept in Java, which is getters and setters. What a getter essentially does is, if you create variables inside the class which are private, and if you want to access the value which is stored inside that particular variable, then you can create a getter and a setter for that particular variable. And in this particular figure, you can see that I've created the getter and the setter for this name variable. So get name is going to return the value which is stored in the variable name. So I just say return name. And in case I want to set the value of the name variable, I have created a setter which is set name, and then I accept a string, and then that's going to basically update the variable here, which is this dot name equal to name. Okay, we're going to talk about what this means here in a bit, but what it essentially does is it's going to update the value of the name variable with the name that we have passed in the code. Okay, so instead of doing user1.name equal to dk, now what you'll be doing is user1.setName. Okay, so now the one crucial question that you're going to ask me is, what is the difference? Why can't I just do this? It seems simple, so why do I need to create a setter again and complicate things, right? So let's talk about the differences here. What the setter is going to do is it allows you to control how the variable is going to get updated. Okay, so let's say your application cannot accept names which are less than 8 characters in length. Okay, now this is an assumption we are making. Okay, now if you use user1.name equal to dk, then your application fails because there's no way of controlling how this variable is getting updated, right? Now instead, if you have a setter, what you can do inside the setter is you can have some kind of validation or control of how the variable is going to get updated, right? So I can check if the length of the variable is less than 8, and in case it is less than 8, I basically throw an exception saying that this was an illegal argument. And if it is not, I just set the variable, I just update the value of the variable. Okay, so this is where the setter comes into play. It allows you to control how important variables are accessed and updated into your code. Okay, I hope you guys understood why the setters and getters are important. And now we are actually going to get into the app that we had done in the previous episode. So we completed the login activity, and today we're going to talk about an enhancement over that code. So previously what we did is we created 2 string variables, username and password, and we stored admin and the password into that. and we are validating it. We are doing a simple string match and then allowing the user to get into the application. Now instead of that, we can create a class called credentials and then store those details inside this particular class, right? So here at the bottom you can see I have created a class, and then you can create two different string variables, name and password, and then store that information. Now why this is necessary is, let's say you have a team of people who are working on a particular project. It is good if things are organized, and if you can create a class called credentials where you can put in the username and password, it is more readable, it is more understandable by someone who's seeing your code, and if they want to just access the values which are there inside this, it is so much more easy rather than having it in one particular place where you have a lot of stuff going on. So it's just so disorganized, and it gets more complicated when the number of lines of code increases. Okay, so to organize things, you use classes, and that's what we'll be doing today. We're going to shift from a simple string variables into creating a class and storing this particular information. So without wasting any more time, let's get into Android Studio. Okay, so we are inside Android Studio, and let's go ahead and define our class. Now there are two ways of creating your class. Now I'm not a fan of creating a class inside the main activity itself, so you can do that. So I just want you to know that there is this possibility, but this is not something that I recommend. I'll tell you why. So let's say you go ahead and create this class called credentials here, and you'll notice that this is a nested class. So inside the public class you have another class called credentials, and then I'm gonna take the variables here and then I'm gonna paste it inside it. Okay, so I have username and password, and they are private and they are part of this class now. Okay, so now these variables are used in the validate function. So if you go to validate function, you will now see that username and password are highlighted in red, and that's because there is no variable called username and password which is defined here, and it is now a part of the credentials class. So that is why it is in red. And to basically now access these variables, you need to create an instance of that particular class, and the way you do it is, as I told you, you use the new keyword and then you use the default constructor. Okay, because we do not have any other constructor defined, so use the default constructor, and there you have it. You have your new object of that class. Now you can access the variables using the object. So you say credentials dot username, and now you'll see that the error is gone, and the same applies to credentials dot password. Okay, now you must be surprised here at this point, because we defined the variable to be private in this particular class, right? So in this class you have defined the username and password to be private, but still you are able to access these variables. So why is the private not working? And that's because you have created an inner class, basically a nested class, and because of that the variables that you define here, even though it is private, it can be accessed by the outer class. Okay, so this is one of the concepts in Java. So you need to make sure that you do not create any class which is nested if you do not want the variables to be accessed by the outer class. Okay, so what I will do now is, instead of having the class here, I'm going to go ahead and create a new class. So go to Java and right click on the first folder here, which is the package name. Click on new Java class, and I'm going to create a new Java class called credentials, and here the visibility is set to public so that I can access it in my main activity, and the modifiers will be none. So click on OK here, and so I have my class created, and I'm going to go ahead and copy these variables into my class, and I'm going to delete the class that I have created here. Okay, so now I've created my class. The variables are now private, and it is now no longer an inner class. It is a separate class in itself, and the way you basically create an object is still going to remain the same. You say credentials, and this is the name of the object, equal to new credentials. And now if you go over to validate function, now the private access modifier is now working. It is showing that this particular username has private access, and that is why it is highlighted in red. Okay, now in case you want the error to go, you can do something like this where you remove the private keyword, and now you should see the error go away, and you can run the app at this point and you will see that everything still works. But let's proceed. Okay, now let's talk about how you can create a constructor to set the values. All right, so here to create a constructor, you just need to pass the name of the class itself, and it takes in two parameters. So one is the username and the other is the password itself, because we have two variables that we need to initialize. And before we actually update the variables, you need to make sure that this is not final, because when you define a particular variable to be final, it means that the value cannot be changed. So here we are changing the value, so that is why you need to change that, and you need not initialize it now, because we'll use the constructor to initialize the values of these variables. So here you can do this dot username equal to username and this dot password equal to password. Now here you can see that I've used capitalization to distinguish between the two variables here so that you don't get confused. And as I already mentioned, this is basically referring to the object of this particular class, right, which you're going to create. And the object dot username, and based on the object that we're creating here, which is credentials, this is going to get replaced by credentials when this works. So this is going to be credentials dot username, credentials dot password. Okay, so how do we initialize this particular username and password right now? So now that we have added the constructor, if you go back to the main activity, you will now see an error here, because we have only passed in a blank constructor previously, and now it expects us to pass in the parameters. So I'm going to pass in the parameters, which is admin, which is the first parameter, and the second parameter is the password. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, and there you have it. I have created the object of that particular class, and I have passed in the values of the username and the password. So it's going to come here and it's going to update these variables. All right, now again, there is no change which happens in the validate function, because it's going to access the username and password which is there, which we have set using the constructor, right? So you can go ahead and run the app now and still everything works. There's no changes to the demo of the app as such. And now to understand getters and setters better, let's go ahead and change the value of this variable to be private, right? So when you set it to private, if you go over to main activity, inside the validate function, the username and password are highlighted in red because they are private. And we'll use the getters and setters, and that's how we can access these private variables. And I'll show you how you can use the getters and setters here. Okay, now to get the getters and setters in Android Studio, there is a shortcut. You can click on Alt Insert and make sure that the numlock is off, and then click on Alt Insert, and you should be seeing this. And if you click on getters and setters, you see the username and password, and you can just use click control and then click on both of them. It's going to get highlighted, and you can click on OK. And here you can see that now the getters and setters are already pre-populated for us. The code is auto-generated. And as I mentioned, a getter is nothing but it's going to return the value of the variable, and get username is going to return the value of username. The get password is going to return the value of password, and set username is going to set whatever value you pass it, and password is also going to function the same way. Okay, now what we're going to do is, instead of saying credentials.username, since username is now a private variable, you can do get username. Okay, and for password, again it's the same, you can do get password. Okay, so at this point you can run the app and check that everything is working, right? Now to just check if the setters are working correctly, what you can do is you can say credentials.set username, and I'm going to change it to admin1. And again, to change the password, I'm going to do set password, and I'm going to say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. Okay, so I have changed the value of the username and password, and now I want you to run the app and try to enter user as admin and password as 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, and you will see that now the app no longer works. It basically it does not allow you to log in now because we have changed the value of the username and password here, right? So it's going to retain the value which we had last entered, and the last entered value is admin1 and 1 2 3 up to 9 in this particular case. So if you enter admin1 and 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 now, it's going to allow you to enter the app. And basically now we have seen how to use classes, we have seen how to use getters and setters, we have understood how the access modifiers public and private work, and basically what you have done here is learned how to write code which is much more readable. And this is mostly important when you go over to corporate where you have to write professional code, and this is the particular coding practice which you need to develop to make sure that whenever someone reads your code, they understand it as soon as they see it. This is what I had for this particular episode, and in the next episode I'm going to show you how you can actually use a registration activity to enter this information, because right now we are hard coding the username and password, and I'm not a fan of hard coding stuff. So you will need to provide a facility in the app to allow the users to enter the admin and the password, and after that you can use that admin and password to enter the app. Okay, so we are going to see that in the next episode, and after that we'll also see how to use multiple user logins as well. So until then, I hope you enjoyed this episode and you understood how classes work. So I have uploaded my code onto my GitHub page in the episode 2 repository of the simple login app screen latest. So if you go to this particular folder and go into the episode 2, you will find the code of this particular episode, and you can have a look at the code in case something is not working or if you couldn't follow something when I was explaining. So make sure you have a look there. And that's what I had for this particular video, guys. So if you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up, and also do not forget to subscribe to my channel, and also press the bell notification icon so that you can get notified whenever a new video comes out. So thank you guys for watching. Happy learning.